Have you had an international team before? Like people from different countries?
No, now with my, I suppose, with executive coaching. So when I move into that space, I do work with quite a few leaders. Apart from Africa, almost every continent. So it gives you exposure to sort of different approaches to leadership. But yeah, like through that, yes.
Mm. How important is it to know the culture of other countries that you're working with? Because in my experience, like we're in Australia, we have a different culture to, and I'll tell a study. This is really interesting, actually. There's a book called The Social Animal by Elliot Aronson, right? Who's a social psychologist. In this book, and again, I'm paraphrasing here, they did a study where they showed Americans an image it was on a wall or something. They then showed Chinese on a wall this image as well. I don't mean Chinese as in their race. I mean they lived in China, as in they were from China, and they lived there their whole life. And same with the Americans. And what they noticed is that with the Chinese, they noticed, and again paraphrasing here, they noticed the more of the global view of the image, right? Whereas the Americans noticed more the individuals in the image. Now, the explanation behind that is when you go to China, they're a communist country, which is that it's more about the whole, like you're an individual part of the whole. Whereas in companies like in countries like Australia, like America, like United Kingdoms, they're more, I guess you'd say, democratic for lack of better words. They are more based on the individual. Everything starts from the individual. Like Jordan Peterson always says, like the individual, then outwards, And they found that those two things were different for those people based on their environment. So I guess my segue to that is like people who are from overseas, they have different ways of seeing the world. And then we kind of, as Australians or, as Americans, wherever you are listening from the world, we push our ideas of how it's supposed to be onto that team member. So I wonder, you know, how does, I guess, one go about discovering what those things are? Is it just a time thing? Is it like, is there things you can do? I suppose if you're active listening and you're trying to build trust, those things happen automatically. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I guess like there's a like concept, cultural competency for leader, which is very important. Talking about Australia, I'm pretty sure quite a few countries are very similar. Let's say in Australia, by judging by Australian Bureau of Statistics, 30% of Australians are born overseas. Not actually, so it's a
Wow.
fairly large percentage. So more likely than not, leaders will come across people from different culture, even if they're born here, if they grow up in a sort of environment exposing
Their
to different
parents.
culture. Yeah,
Mm.
so that kind of needs to be taken into consideration. I guess it's up to leaders then to be more proactive and to understand the culture and some norms that are like suitable or work well in a particular environment. I'd say way back, one of my experience that in some cultures, for example, eye contact, let's say in most of Western societies, it's a kind of admired, what you're supposed to do. It's to show respect and that you're listening, etc. In some cultural, that's rude.
Wow.
And kind of like, and I didn't know that, like, we're one of, like, one of my team members, they kind of like one and avoid eye contact, and I thought they're shy or whatever that might be, but like it's a sign of respect, and it's nothing to do kind of with like a shyness or anything. It is like you don't look a person and like directly in the eye all the time. It's just to kind
What
of.
country was this?
Well, I think it is Singapore. Like that's what I have in some Asian countries.
Wow.
Obviously, when I say Asian countries, there's so many different cultures. I can't put everyone in one umbrella. Even
Yep.
in Singapore, you have different people from different backgrounds, so as well. But yeah, this particular person was originally from Singapore, and that was very sort of eye-opening for me. So kind of like, I was just sort of didn't know what's happening. It just shows like small things like that we don't pay attention to. We assume something different and based on our cultural bringing, where for that person, might be a quite different experience. And sort of not understanding sort of where each person is coming from, it could create sort of that lack of communication, perhaps lose that trust, or whatever that might be. And it's kind of like a long, I suppose, answer to your question. Leaders need really, they can't wait and think how I'm going to find out. They obviously they can find out from person if they're happy to share, but there's so much information out there that we need to understand. Like, well, I got a team member from, I suppose, Tunisia, for example. I don't know why Tunisia, but let's say, and what do I know about that culture? How they perceive, what's their work environment, what they are, what they find like a professional manners. Some professional manners are different. Let's say, I'm not sure if you observe, let's say if you go in um, uh, some East Asia countries like Japan or some other countries, when you hand just a simple thing, and when you had your business card, you hand it with two hands, not with one. Sort of in a Japanese culture, even if you have a business meeting, you're meant to bring present. Kind of like just small things like that. It sounds like sometimes, why would you bring a present? But it's not about me. Like, you need to see how that resonates with other people. So, yeah, spending time and understanding other culture is so important.
Yeah, put simply, it's not that hard to find. Like, you just type in YouTube, like, what are some cultural differences between this country and this country? So it's pretty easy to do that.
Yeah, spot on. Very easy. Like, you don't need to spend 10 minutes or even 5 minutes. You can find that information.